Welcome to Poemalogues. I'm Dr. Kelly Hamilton, and we are going to have a conversation today about power. I am your Milwaukee Poet Laureate, which means that I have been given the honor of being the ambassador for poetry for the greater city. And now that we're on the internet, I'm hoping to be one of the many laureate ambassadors of this art form for the world. And the art form, we're going to spend this time looking at poetry as a tool to lend us a way to fall into conversation. For as many conversations as there are, there's a poem that's been written about it. So my personal excitement is less about converting everyone into a poet, although you're already poets, and more about finding a way to talk about the stories and the life behind these poems and these life narratives that we all have in common. So Poemalogues is a series of conversations, and we're going to land to a poem at the end of each discussion. What this is not is a literary exploration, academic dialogue about the merits of this art. That's for another session, for another stream, and for another day. We're going to use these poems to talk about power, body, freedom, and place. Every Wednesday, 4:30, right here. Today is power. And of course, power is about a narrative. So how I started, I want to share with how I fell into the discussion. I was thinking about the power of a story. And of course, what a story can do, the fact that you have a story of your own, the power of being able to decide what's in that story and what matters and what doesn't. But there's also the power of being powerless to a story that's been imposed on you. There's also the discussion of how a story can be wielded, right? So I was starting to look for some poems that talked about this idea of knowing, this idea of story, and fell upon this poem that really talks about how we, as a culture or as a family, or you've got this narrative that's been pinned to you because of how you look. You've got this story that follows behind you because of that thing that happened in 5th grade. You have the stories that we ignore. And when there's stories that are pinned to us by structure, oh, that's the greatest story of power. Did I complain yet about having to vote in a shutdown during a pandemic? We'll get to that power play later. But I have some guests that are going to share their journeys to a poem in this Poemalogue, and I'll share with you the poem that I found at the end of the program. I want to spend as much time as we can hearing from some peers and poets and thinkers and just people who are also in this moment in time together. So the first guest I'd like to bring to the screen is Jaha Zainabu, who is visiting us all the way from Los Angeles. How are you?
I'm well. I am well.
So what were you in the middle of? Because you can be in the middle of something in the middle of a shutdown pandemic. So what were you in the middle of?
Right in this moment, I'm teaching a class, a writing class right now, and I'm also taking a class right now. And so I was in the middle of doing my homework for the class I'm taking. I'm taking a memoir writing class with Dr. Michael Datcher.
Ooh.
And so I'm in the middle of just pulling out stories that that I don't really talk about, and I'm just like in the rough draft of like, do I say this? Do I not say this? And so it's due by midnight. So at midnight tonight. So of course I waited until today.
That's when the good juice comes at the end.
Yeah. So let's hope nobody in my cohort is listening. But yeah. So I waited until today. So it's due at midnight. So I was in the middle of doing that.
You're not alone. You're not alone in that.
Right.
So tell me a little, or not just to tell me, but share a bit about who you are. So we've got from that intro that you write things. But how about
I do write things.
Share your whole life story.
My whole life story. So my name is my whole life story in 2 minutes. So I was born and reared in Long Beach, California. I currently live in Inglewood. I am a poet. I have always been a writer. I always knew that I was going to be a writer. Always. I'm also a painter. I'm a visual artist. I've always I love to draw, but I didn't know that I would be somebody who sold art. And then one day I had an art show, just like I needed some money. And I was like, you know what, maybe I'll sell some art. And it sold. And so since then I've been selling art. Thankfully, I'm also, I have written 5 books right now, collections of poetry. I teach workshops throughout the country. I am a mother of an incredible 22-year-old young man. Let's see. I love the words. I just love words. I'm a storyteller. I produced a storytelling series called Red Stories here in Inglewood. Actually, started in LA and then it came a little bit south to Inglewood. And Red Stories went for 5 years. Before that, I produced a poetry series called Journey, and that was in LA for 6 years. So I'm a writer. I write things. I'm a blogger. Catch me on my blog at it's Jaha's World at Blogspot. My blog is 12 years old now.
Check it.
And I'm in my blog every day, on some, what am I grateful for? Pictures, paintings, musings. I use my blog like a journal. And so I operate like nobody is reading my blog. And so I just really tell things. I tell stories. I tell, I talk about mental health a whole lot.
Tell me where you started in power.
Where did I start with power? When I knew that was the conversation, the first place I went was my godmother. As a matter of fact, you met her, Dasha, when you came out to my place in LA. Remember, her name was V. Kali, and she lived down the street, and we went
in the village.
So, her oldest child, her daughter Zuri, was shot and killed, and in a drive-by. She had her baby. Her baby was about, her son might have been 3 or 4 or something like that. And she was in a car. The boy was in the car, and she, you know how we do sometimes. So she, mommy, be right back, and so she ran in the store to get like some juice or something she needed for the baby. And she heard gunshots, and she's a mom. And her kid was outside, and you're not supposed to run toward a gunshot, but her baby's outside. So she ran outside, and she got shot in the stomach, and she died. And and this goes to power, because so when I talked to V, she just said Jahazari's dead. Like, and why is this connected to power? Because that every day she lives, V, and every day she is just, it's power, and she is courageous, she is bold, she is fierce, and to be, like Black woman in, the face of my daughter got shot and killed, and who she is for our poetry community. Her name is V. Kali, and she's well known and respected here in LA. And just how she mothers all of us in the face of that is just power to me. And so I immediately went there with power.
Settling into so much in that narrative, one, the heartache of her loss, her as a mother and as an individual in the communities feeling that also. And the two things come to mind in that power. It fuels others, and hopefully it also fuels the person. Mm. So it's the smile that she is that wellspring for so many. And it's also the shoulder slump a little bit that even in spite of herself, right. Or just making sure that hopeful that there's also that power in terms of what she's going to need at this time. And that theme of humans who show up, particularly when those humans who are Black women, showing up with all the calluses, right?
with all the calluses. I love it. Yeah. And, and even when you said how she takes care of others and like, in spite of herself, for sure. And even it's funny because I talked to her just an hour ago and just on some check-in, and she said, so I was like, well, how are you doing? What's going on? I talk, maybe every few days we talk. And today, about an hour ago, she was like, yeah, I was just coming from the store and it's been raining here in LA. And she does drive, but she doesn't have a car. So I said, well, how did you get to the store? And so she was like, oh, I just caught the bus. And usually I'll take her anywhere she wants to go. And so I said, why did you catch the bus during this time? Like, why are you on the bus with groceries? And so she's like, well, you 10 miles away. I'm like, V, I would crawl 10 miles to you. Like, don't stop doing that. And this is her taking care of me so that I don't leave the house, and but that's what we do. That's how we mother. Like, we mother everybody. She is our treasure. And and she should be treasured. But this is her just taking care of me. I don't want you out in all this rain. Drive. I have a car, and so I'm like, so it's okay for you to be catching a bus with 3 bags of groceries, and
you think there's I'm wondering if there's in this time that we are reevaluating and reconsidering and everything. Is that something to think forward about in terms of that power of making sure that's a power that is a fuel and not a hazard as a people, as a tendency, especially the power, going back to the power of a narrative that you are supposed to be so strong to. You're supposed to be the one who, that the narratives that drive us to, I don't want to say overheal. I don't know if there's such thing as overhealing, but I did find it peculiar to learn that I could overcondition my hair. I mean, how can you overlove your hair? But apparently that's a thing. That's a thing.
It is a thing. It is a thing. I was reading this poem that I'd written years ago after Trayvon first got killed. And it was a letter. It was actually, the poem was called A Run-On for Sabrina Fulton and Other Mothers When a T-Shirt Is Not Enough. And there was a line where I was saying, like, why are we supposed to be this strong and pray this hard, and there's no space, there's no time, there's no give, there's no sit back and heal, there's no grieve, there's just get up and keep going and keep going and keep going. And there's no, and not just for Sabrina Fulton, but for all of the Sabrina Fultons, because we are all of the Sabrina Fultons because we all feel it, all of the parents, all of the aunties, all of the godmommies, all of us's. And it hasn't stopped, but we still have to keep going. And keep going and keep going. And there's some kind of we summon some kind of power from the ethers to be able to do it, because there's no past. Sabrina Fulton could not take her Trayvon's the funeral, program to the woman at the phone company and say, I need an extension, because there's none of that. There's just get the power. I remember one day, this is many years ago, even before my son, I was working at some clothing store in the mall, and I was very ill this weekend. I was very, very, very sick. And so I called, whoever your shift manager, whoever you call. And I said, I am a worker. Like, I'm not, let me call in because I don't feel like it, So I called and I said, I'm really sick. And so she said, well, we're shorthanded today. And so I said, yeah, but I am really sick. I'm vomiting. I'm really sick. And so she said, well, can you just feel better? And
that's how that works.
That's how that works. You feel better because they're shorthanded. And so, but that's how we're treated. Like, you know, sure. Feel better, work it out, and you know, come on in.
So what power poem did this lead you to?
It led me to a poem by Heven Ambachew. I hope I'm saying her last. Do you know her?
No.
Okay, good. Not good, but I hope I'm saying her last name correctly. But Heven Ambachew, and the poem is it's not long, but I won't read the whole thing. But there are a couple of stanzas, and it says, "Bending without breaking, bleeding without dying, self-love without harm, versatile and dripping honey. You move mountains from back-ended compliments, constantly living." Under attack, loving yourself, a political act. And the poem is called Dear Black Woman, or Dear Black Women. And so that's where it led me to.
Oh, excellent. Thank you. Thank you for this. Anything, I don't want to leave any of those a thought nugget lingering. So something else you want to share on power?
I'm going to say it takes power for us to keep moving, but it also takes power and courage and strength to be still. Ooh. And I think that, that's what this time is teaching us, that place that you had to be, you actually don't have to be there.
Yeah, my life, Jaha.
Yeah, you don't have to, you know what I mean? So it takes that kind of power, and I kind of had to learn that the first a couple of weeks of this whole lockdown. And I wasn't from that family where, we could just chill and relax, and we didn't chill and relax. We cleaned, we did homework, we got ready for church. We did some homework my mama made up, but there was no, and then
chill and relax.
Yeah, no, we didn't chill and relax. We didn't chill and relax. And then every job I had, I started working. My first job was McDonald's, where, time to lean, time to clean. And so I always had that busy,
Well, and then when bringing it out, I want to make sure I bring on the next guest, but I'm wanting to give a toast because it's 5 o'clock someplace where y'all are.
Not here.
My life it is.
But that don't matter.
Not at all. I'm going to bring you back at the end, okay?
All right. Love you.
Our next conversation, we're going to bring all the way from the Twin Cities. I am inviting Miss Katie FS to the screen. Hello, Katie, with the dance.
Hello. Oh, hello.
You promised me the swivel. Get a chair swivel in your life, good people. How are we?
Fantastic. Welcome to my COVID-19 office.
Nice.
Otherwise known as the room with all the plants that would kill the cat if he could get in here.
We could make it happen. So yeah, this is Studio D. Dining room. So thank you for making the time out. And what were you making time from? What were you doing?
Well, I am really lucky to be working. And so I was writing some standard operating procedures for event management.
Ooh, sexy.
Very much so. But yeah, that was today, because today is Tuesday.
Every day is Tuesday.
Okay, yeah.
Every day.
Time has no meaning. Yes. But yeah, that's a lot of what I have been doing, and as much as possible, like making some vitamin D with my skin, because I'm not going out very often.
That's not happening so much. But when you were going out, a little bit about where you went. Would give us your whole story in about 2 minutes.
So I grew up, as I think you know, in the middle of nowhere, Wisconsin, up north. And when I graduated from high school and escaped, I went to Iowa and I studied communication with an emphasis, of course, in rhetoric and argumentation. So I did a lot of political speech writing and troublemaking, and then playwriting and performance poetry. And then I got my MFA in creative writing.
So fancy.
At Dasha University.
That's right.
And I actually have been back up in the Northwoods since my mother died about 4-ish years ago. And so, so I'm closer to family. And a thing, you're going to laugh about this. So maybe you've heard that Minneapolis is the city of the lakes. I grew up 90 minutes from here and had no idea that that meant that there were lakes in the city. So since then, I have literally discovered the lakes. And I do try to seriously like walk around or ride my bike around. I mean, Minneapolis has a great park system that I knew nothing about as a child. And now
it wasn't for you then. It wasn't for you to know then. That's all.
Evidently,
it was in due time.
It was in the middle of nowhere. My home was a park. So I did, after my mother's death, when we were going through her stuff, I did find my very first book from first grade, and it is amazing. There's a kidnapping.
Was your name in it in crayon?
Oh yeah, and I illustrated it and everything.
Oh,
I'm the whole package. Oh yeah, it's a book. It's amazing.
This face.
So yeah, I have been, I think, largely, and I depict these words carefully, keeping myself sane while I am seething. One of the questions I brought was definitely how it felt to vote yesterday in Milwaukee, ma'am.
Seething is definitely a word that I would toss out there first. On all the reasons that it was so blatant and absurd, and at the same time, what is all this fury going to do? Because still here we are out here, and some people later in the evening were actually in the rain. So we're in a pandemic.
Oh wow!
The poll workers are dressed like you're in the scene of MASH. They're in surgical gear.
Wow.
You have lines that are blocks long, people that shouldn't be walking distances, standing in line for these hours, and at the same time proud because it was civic, but for the love of all things reasonable and what's supposed to be a process for the people were dismissed. So it was just, definitely can get on a whole thing and spend this whole time talking about the experience and how intentional it was as well. That it wasn't an accident. It wasn't a clash of logistics. It wasn't what are you going to do in the middle? No, there were opportunities at multiple levels to behave differently and driven by intentions and objectives other than human beings, particularly human beings. Don't let them not be rich and be of color. An experience that was just unconscionable yesterday. So that's how I feel about it.
Yeah. I will say from the outside, from next door, there are plenty of people. I mean, that came up in my corporate morning meeting where we were just appalled by the experience that our neighbors were forced to have. Right. And in this process that is meant to, and you're encouraged to, and there's this party line about raising your voice and valuing participation. Right. And there's this derision that if you don't participate, you can't complain. Right.
You're in the right place. You're in the right place.
Oh, yeah, and I saw you and multiple other people, right? But I think most of the folks in Milwaukee who had so fewer, polling places than were needed, and who had received incorrect information about where their polling places were, without, face masks or protective gear that could actually protect people.
Are you talking about my fashionable scarf?
No, it was beautiful.
Thank you.
I wish everybody had an I'm voting scarf.
I did have a friend, speaking of friends, how many people are in your house in this text message? 3. Yeah, I'm bringing a mask over right now. So I think she saw your picture. I think she saw you on Instagram. I said, maybe so, maybe so.
Yeah.
So I have a
I mean, it matched. It was gorgeous.
Thank you, Emily. Our faces are protected. Well, I want to ask you this, Katie. So where did you start then in power?
Sure. So I think it's important to say, and you can see I'm kind of you're split screening with my notes because I'm a note keeper. But it's important, right? Especially as a white woman in the USA, that to me, that power means that instead of using public platforms, that I am uplifting instead other people whose voices are more often suppressed. And it's interesting that you asked me to speak about power, because I think a lot of slam poets will allude to someone that they saw who was performing poetry, and that for them was the click where they were like, oh, you know, we can write about these things. And for me, it was reading Audre Lorde's Power, which is not actually where I'm going with all this, but I read that and I was like, I know we'll talk more about it, but I was like, you can write about these things. And not in ways that are political speeches, right? Or debates, but in ways that are magic and can speak to people's hearts and the truth of that.
How had you taken that opportunity before, or what had you seen before? You know what I mean?
Well, I studied, argumentation and rhetoric. And so the idea of what is evidence instead of what is compelling, or the idea that narrative or anecdotal evidence is not actually evidence, which is in some situations, sure, but not in all situations.
Okay.
And the idea of, as we're talking about power and narrative, I have to remember, and I have been reminded, that I am not necessarily a protagonist or the protagonist. And in many cases, I can be the antagonist, even without intending to, because that's how power can work. And this is nothing new, right? And I make it explicit because I think in this audience or any audience, I mean, too many white folks don't hear that unless it comes out of another white person's mouth.
What do you tell them? What do you say?
Well, I say, here are my thoughts, and here's a list of people who I think you should read.
Did you read?
What?
Did you tell people to read?
It was that, well, I mean, Twitter, you're reading if you're on Twitter. I mean, that counts, or poems, or, I mean, more and more, maybe TV's getting better. I'm not watching enough TV.
But I'm sorry, you were saying you point them to places where they can get fed other.
Well, right. And I try to point that out, right? Where I'm like, these are not new ideas. These are not original thoughts to me. Lots of people in this world have taught me lots of things. And in fact, there are scholars who have done actual rigorous research, and it's not secret, and we can find this research. And if you need help, let me bring you to the library and I will show you
how
what I
manage resistance or the dismay, or this is at this moment, Katie, I'm like, feel like I'm hearing secrets from backstage. Well, we keep, I want these conversations to happen when all of you and your not people of color cousins and coworkers are together. What is that? How do you hold that space? Which is a different part of discussion. And then how does that go? What do you say? What are they telling you?
I just push into it. I am not especially graceful at it. But if you wait for the opening doesn't come. That is the structure of, Thanksgiving dinner. No one's going to give you the perfect opening to say, who did you vote for? I, in fact, was at a family memorial service by Madison about a month ago. And we were like, so the primaries, is everybody registered? Does anyone need to talk through some, and like talking to, it was in a bar, so talking to like a bartender and being like, I mean, do you need somebody to help you write? Do you need some websites?
They picked up their beverage and walked away, or did they engage?
I think I am definitely the aunt who says the things. And so I have a brother who will roll his eyes, and nieces who are like, what? Older nieces who are like teenagers or early 20s. And I also have younger nibblings. My sister moved to Indianapolis, and her oldest first month of kindergarten, police officer had been killed in the line of duty, and there was like a parade, and the school got let out for all of the children to line the streets of the parade. And there's a long conversation that we don't have to get into about how I feel about policing, but I did say to my sister, if you would like me to start the conversation with the 6-year-old about policing in America and in Mike Pence's Indiana,
ooh,
you just let me know. I'm available for time anytime. And so, I have to concede that I'm not parenting yet. Remind people that I am here and I have my opinions. And if you're going to say X, Y, Z, don't do it in front of me. I'm going to bring it up. I'm going to be that guy. And I think having that reputation is good for the folks who disagree with me. And I think it's also good for the, youngins who are curious to know that there's someone in the family to be like, ooh.
Thank you for being that auntie at the family gathering. So you've hopefully given some folks some little kernels of courage to be that voice. You got to start with the babies. Be the uncle or the auntie who takes them out on outings, and then
got to start at Thanksgiving dinner,
and then read subversive poetry to them. So I would ask you, speaking of poems, what poem did you land on?
I was reminded of "Beautiful Biology" by Will Evans, which is a performance. It's a persona poem, and Will gives performance as a disabled speaker who during the poem loses the affect of this disability and then comes back to that voice, both in the text and also in his performance. And I used to work with the Ali Webb Center in Omaha, which is a nonprofit organization that serves adults with developmental disabilities, and they had a poetry class. And I brought that poem into my students and wanted to know, did they feel insulted or upset? Here's an able-bodied person taking on your voice. But instead, every single class I ever brought that to were thrilled. My students were super enthusiastic to hear a story that sounded like theirs and on a stage where they typically did not. And even when they were performing, because there was also an acting class, they were not playing characters with disabilities, right? Sometimes they were fairy tales, so they were playing characters who had magic. But that really challenged me. Right. And that kind of idea that I have of power of like ceding the platform, and sort of that blanket statement where I've been in conversations where I'm like, if you're going to write about an experience that is not your own, take caution. And that's still something fair enough.
Fair enough.
Yet it was something that I had to it didn't square with everything I had thought previously. And it's a great poem, Beautiful Biology. I could not find a copy of it in print. I think that the performance, specifically the performance in Seattle, and if you Googled it or looked it up, that's the video that pops up. And it's beautiful. And so well done, Will Evans.
Yes, we love Will Evans. And as I get the hang of the show notes, we'll be sure to have all of the poems that are listed that we can share today. We'll have the links there so people can come back and feast on this conversation and definitely the art that you share. So, Katie, thank you for making time for this. We're going to bring everybody back shortly at the end, and we're going to bring our third conversation to the screen. Excited to talk with Mr. Roger Bonair-Agard by way of Trinidad through Chicago and Brooklyn. And where else have you been on this here globe? With a post office box?
Who knows?
Most excellent. Well, thank you for making time for this conversation today. When I thought about, okay, Poemalogues, when I talk about power and I want to include a poem, someone who is accustomed to a soapbox, I don't even, your name came up at all three clicks. So I'm excited to hear your.
Thanks for having me. I'm
absolutely
really appreciative.
So what were you in the middle of? What's going on? What's your Rona time right now?
You know, as you know, I teach in I teach incarcerated youth, and our organization, Free Right Arts and Literacy, we also work with criminalized youth on a whole, and so we have a lot of alumni, kids who we taught inside juvie who are now outside, who we work with. So these days, as a matter of fact, this Tuesday coming, I'm hosting a conversation with a number of them called Confined and Isolated, with them talking about what their experiences in solitary confinement and being incarcerated as a whole, about the techniques they developed for survival within that can be useful for us in our own confinement and isolation going forward. So I'm constantly making calls and trying to get those ducks in a row,
sure,
so that those young people can do that work. So I think that's my biggest interruption. That plus you know, fathering 3 girls and
say that again.
Fathering 3 girls plus this really bomb ass rice and stewed beef I made today.
It happened. Just you don't have to, I don't want you to spill all your secrets, but just give us, what's the one thing you added or did that makes it this bomb ass rice stew? What's part of it?
Well, this is not news to Trinidadians, but we stew meat by burning sugar in the oil first, and then you brown the meat in that burnt sugar.
Huh? Say that again.
You put your oil in the pot.
Yeah.
When the oil gets hot, you put sugar in that pot. When the sugar gets like a little burnt, you put your meat in. When it browns in that burnt sugar, you flip it. Your other side browns. When the meat gets good and brown, then you start adding water and stock and whatever else and stewing it down, etc. You are welcome.
I am. So thank you. And I'm also laughing at the other folks who also said thank you, and they're gonna have to throw a pot out tonight. They're gonna have to throw a pot out. They're gonna burn up some sugar and some grease. It's gonna. We can't have fire in the days of Rona. But yes, thank you for that. Thank you for that. So you people from Trinidad know this recipe, so that's home for you. So give us from that moment to now. What's your whole life story?
So I am born in Brooklyn to 2 Trinidadians, raised in Trinidad mostly, except for a short stint in Canada. I am a writer, primarily poet, but the barriers between genres are kind of like really sloppy and sometimes non-existent to me. I mentioned I'm the father of 3. I live in Chicago these days, and the hub of my work now is in working with incarcerated people, is in working towards transformative justice, is in working towards transformative justice in my own life, and is in working towards a world in which no one is ever again imprisoned. I think that's my life story.
No one ever again imprisoned.
Yeah.
We can do it?
I say yes because 10 years ago, 15 years ago, to say you were an abolitionist was to basically clear any room you were in. And now that conversation is not so strange to people anymore. I think we're still mostly a ways off from the kind of society that constructs itself in such a way that that jails become unnecessary. But we are significantly closer to it as an idea than we were 15, 20 years ago.
Yes. And in this space, and the space being these borders, borders by way of landmass, and also borders by way of an American psyche.
Sure.
Are we going to get there pushing the idea, or will we get there by presenting steps to get there? So like not my first question, but I think about the voices that are the naysayers. And I don't even give them that connotation of naysayers.
Sure.
It's more adding to the mix, right? So what are we going to do with the people who should be reprimanded, maybe not removed from society?
Right.
You've done some you need to be dealt with. How do we deal with it?
So I think that's a really great framing of that question, right? Like whether or not we come at it by pushing the idea of that, or whether we come at it from steps. And I think both things have to happen. I think that steps that because we have to reconstruct the idea of what safety is. My partner today was talking about the relationship between what is safety and what is sacred. And the fact that the time we are in right now means that for all of us, we have to kind of dovetail safety and sacred in order to get through it. The idea of what keeps us safe has to be something that we keep sacred. And if we are to keep that sacred, if we are to keep bodies as sacred, if we are to keep lives as sacred, what's the real thing that we do in order to make that so, right? For instance, this is just like one little corner of the work. Right now, we are working through an initiative called Access to Justice, in which we are working with community navigators, young people who were locked up with us, who are now out in the world navigating their community. And so they come out of jail. Sometimes they're 20, 21. They've done juvenile life or whatever it is. And now they have to find jobs. They have to try to go to school. They have to find places to live. We're dealing with people who have been locked up for most of their teens, some of them. So all of the things that we think of as automatic is not automatic to them. They have to ask somebody, how do you go about getting a driver's license now? How do you go about getting a passport? And as they get that information, they have peers in their communities who are also coming to them for that information. Plus, in the case of Free Write, they've come through us through an art practice, right? So now they're out in the world with this practice that they were also trying to figure out, how do I continue this art practice in a way that works for me while I'm trying to do all these other things. Now, anybody doing that in their community is making their community safer and stronger, right? Within the context of a world in which we have already created divisions and hierarchies, which meant that in order to make their community safety and stronger, they were doing things that we consider to be criminal, right?
The power of context.
In our context, now they are able to pursue that safety and strength within a completely different context, and within a context that allows them to integrate, not just in a way that is acceptable to us, but in a way that makes us more powerful and more useful too. And so that this particular Access to Justice Community Navigator program allows us to pay them for that as well. We should. that's just a way of framing safety differently from the way in which the public has been taught to frame safety, as a way for them to agree to just lock people up. You see what I'm saying?
Yes, and it goes back.
Yeah, so we're changing framing to start with. So that is one of the steps, if you will. But I feel like in some kind of way, even if the idea is difficult for people, or even something that makes them put up resistance, you say, look, we're actually going to this fucking like wonderful place where your tax dollars don't even have to pay for this bullshit.
How about that?
Yeah.
But how tightly we cling to the idea of the idea, right? So I was responding to when you are making the distinction of safety being something that you gain from, which is a different cell than something that's protecting you from a different thing.
Right.
And how to make the case. I mean, I guess I shouldn't be surprised by human nature. I want to like this. I want to like this friend of a friend because you like that friend of a friend before I even get to know that person on their own. How advertising works, how just human nature. It's not even a judgment space.
But what I think
people get out of it, appealing to what people get from it, is a way to make it.
Sure. Yeah, I think what's powerful about it, I mean, talking about power, I think what's powerful about the idea is that from those conversations, it's not too far a leap to move into to exposing for ourselves and for others how what we already know isn't actually human nature. All right, like the kinds of justice we know, the kind of justice we know most readily is punitive justice, right? So ask anybody if they've ever been thrown out of class, spanked, put in a corner because they, as a kid, whatever. And everybody knows that as soon as you do something wrong, that the response to it has to be this thing, right? This is what enables us to build from the moment that we are old enough to start to link ideas together and build a supposed logic of it, that if somebody does something wrong, you got to put them in jail. Even the storybooks for kids, even the shows for kids have, there's cops and robbers, Batman comes, grabs the kid, puts him in jail, right? So you 4, 5, 6, everything is leading you towards an understanding of punitive justice, right?
Even if you're being banished to another planet, the idea is you're being dealt with.
Exactly. So that by the time you get, a few more of us have probably heard the term restorative justice, right? And so now you have to kind of rethink, okay, maybe there is a way for somebody who has committed harm to go through steps to try to restore what they have damaged, or at least to address it, and in addressing it, make the commitment to never do that damage again, right? And so that's another movement. But beyond that, what we're looking at is transformative justice, right? What we're looking at is the idea that we can address everything in a society which created the conditions or the container that made a person commit an act, and that if we can address those, then the act wouldn't get committed and have to be restored in the first place, and is therefore and therefore what you've done is something transformative.
So it's this place, it's a way to actually get off of this loop that one action or value or lack thereof feeds the other one. So I wonder is this where you started in your quest, in your journey of power? I wanted to know how you landed at the poem that you chose.
So yeah, well, that's really interesting. That's a really interesting question coming from that conversation. I think the first time there are two foundational stories for me that are about how I learned what power is. When we were 9, we moved to Winnipeg, Canada, from Trinidad. For those of us watching who don't know where Trinidad is, it's all the way south in the Caribbean. It's real close to the equator. It's 85, 90 degrees all the fucking time. And we moved to a place that's about 6 hours directly north of where Katie is from, right? So everybody in the school was white. I was the only black kid. And from day one, kids said, nigger. My mom, as we were headed there, was like, it's going to be real different. I give you permission to protect yourself anywhere you see fit. So for the first 2 weeks of school, I fought every day. My sense of punitive justice was, if you think I'm going to take this treatment all the time, I'm going to stop that now by putting my fist in your face. And of course, after a while, the authorities were like, we're going to call your mother in. You can't just be hitting people. And the other nuance of power in that was the permission my mom gave me. So I was able to go home and say to my mom, listen, you should expect a call anytime soon. This has been happening. And if it continues to happen, this will continue to be my action in response. And my mom said, I'm glad you're defending yourself, but that's going to get tiring. Why don't you start just writing about how you feel? And I said, okay. And I just started writing about how I feel, and it worked. I was able to like ignore some of the names and some of the foolishness that was going on. I got in less fights. And of course, I didn't have the articulation for it at the time, but what therefore I learned about writing from Jump Street was that it did something. It wasn't some esoteric act that you performed at school. Writing was a thing that you used to effect change, to perform a change to a condition that you were going through. So that's one story. The other story of power actually happens earlier than that. And I'm about 6, and we're in Trinidad, and we're on TV, and I'm looking at TV, and something about Marilyn Monroe comes up. And, I'm just starting to have a sense that there are ways people talked about particular kinds of women. And I turned to my mom and I said, is Marilyn Monroe bad? And my mom said, nothing is wrong with Marilyn Monroe. She can have as many men as she wants if she loves them, right? Which for 1974 or whatever that was, I think was pretty radical. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, okay. And of course, again, I did not know that at the time, but what that conversation was doing was unraveling, or at least making shaky a conversation about power that was par for the course in the rest of the world, right? My mom was saying something completely different about women and their agency from what I was hearing and about to step out into the world and experience for the rest of the time. So those are the two stories that represent my foundations of understanding of power to me.
Excellent. Please share the piece.
Oh, so yeah, so the piece is Audre Lorde's Power that Katie alluded to already, and I probably came across that poem for the first time in the late 90s or early 2000s. And I recognized it as an analogy, if you will, for what I discovered as a 9-year-old in Winnipeg. Okay. That, the first stanza of that poem says, the difference between poetry and rhetoric is being ready to kill yourself instead of your children, right? And so that's a brain scrambler, right? Like you can, this might be the 123rd time I'm reading this poem, and I know where she's going to go, and it still scrambles my brain to read those words. But then the poem goes on to talk about the situation of a child who has been shot dead by a cop who is set free in New York City, even though he said, I didn't notice the size or anything else, only the color. But what she does is, in the middle of that poem, she is then really skillfully moving between the rhetorical techniques of prose and poetry to show what happens when she takes when she considers the fact of a thing, as opposed to what happens when she can take it and put it within the context of an idea that layers and nuances it so that they can all fit inside her brain. And that her ability to do that is what stops her from running out and grabbing somebody's mother and setting fire to their bed. Right? So, right?
Poetry saves lives.
Right. And usually not the poets first.
No, not this time.
Right. So So that's why that poem was it for me. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. I would like to bring our other voices back.
Nice.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
We talked about power and whatnot.
Yes.
So I wanted to offer this opportunity to let you creative brains and impassioned poets and humans on this planet get a little feedback about what you heard. What are you thinking?
Can I jump in, Dasha?
Please, jump on in.
So, Roger, big up to your mother for telling you to protect yourself any way you see fit.
Right.
I thought that was like super dope, like, you know, and also the story about Marilyn Monroe. You know, she can have as many men as she wants, as long as she loves them. I love that. And thank you so much for that. Thank you for the work that you do with the incarcerated youth. It is so necessary. And I just thank you so much. Katie, thank you. I was very interested in, well, thank you for being the auntie that says things, that says all the things. I'm the auntie that says the things too.
Yes.
Also, Katie, thank you. Right. I'd be interested to hear some of the reactions that you get from having those very revolutionary conversations with you know, friends and families. I remember doing a show. I was in New York and I did the show. And afterward, there was this talk and, you know, question and answer period. And this white woman in the audience, she asked, well, you know, what can I do, you know, as a white woman to, you know, and I'm like, you know what, go home to your mama.
Yeah. It's true. It's true. I don't have to tell you folks what's out there. I don't have to convince anybody who's lived it. I think you're not hearing me.
What happened?
Okay. Okay. I mean, I have a brother who like rolls his eyes, but also I have you know, friends. Well, I think within family, I try to really distribute age-appropriate reading, and that's often like Watchmen, or like I try to stick to comics. I like comics, or Lumberjanes, which doesn't directly talk about like issues necessarily as explicitly, but does allude to you know, heroes, and has you know, many gendered like characters, and not a lot of white folks controlling the world, and so that's something I can give to my 8-year-olds. Yeah. And say, hey, what'd you think? You know, and that's not necessarily what do you think about the cops in Indianapolis? That is, though, laying groundwork for, you know, not every story that you read needs to be about a princess who looks like you. And so very happy, you know, whatever. It's just you're getting a present. It's books. I think something that with my friends, who are my friends out of choice, not because we are blood, I tend to be a little more direct. I know that when I've made mistakes before and been called on them in public, the people who are trying to comfort me are often my white friends, which is how I know it's a function of whiteness, to make sure that I am comfortable, even when I know that even when I'm telling them that I've made a mistake or they know that I have, and I can say that. And I can say, hey, I hear you, and I appreciate that you are coming from a place that feels like kindness, but that does not change that sometimes we can be the vehicle of oppression, and we need to look at this conversation right here. And that's a buzzkill.
Yeah,
you know, especially when somebody's trying to be nice to me or make me feel better, but it's important. And at this point, if you're not expecting that from me, and I've cultivated kind of this place, I think, I mean, if you're not expecting that from me, or you don't know me very well.
Fair enough.
So, yeah.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Be mindful of the time. I'm not asking.
Sure.
I'll putting you out of studio, my dining room. But I did want to acknowledge that we wanted to set aside make sure we had this time for this conversation.
Yeah.
Everybody that's out there watching, thank you for being out there watching. The hope for this is not only did you have a chance to kind of sit in and listen to just humans who happen to be creatives, and there'll be a different assortment of folks who join us each week, but that you heard something that got you thinking that you'll take into your conversations. And if you are also wanting to join the Poemalogue and you have a poem in mind, you can send that to poems@theretreatmke.com. We're going to be collecting all of your pieces that you suggest, and we're going to compile them into an anthology of the people's conversation about body, power, freedom, and place. So I wanted to say thank you to everyone and let you know that, yes, if you have to dip because you gave yourself an hour for this time, we'll see you next week at 4:30. We're going to talk about body. If anyone is able to hang on for a few more minutes, I want to give both of you a chance to, if you want to have anything else you want to share about what you heard or that you want to share with the folks so that you're thinking before we wave to everybody.
I do have a question actually for both of you, or everybody, but for both of you in particular. A question that I brought into this, and so we've talked a little bit about it, has been, how has your artistic practice been affected by this social isolation? And I hear Jaha talk about, that really powerful moment of it takes power to be still, especially when it's required. And Dasha, I mean, the conversation about voting in a pandemic, but individually, like one by one, if we believe in, the power of an artistic practice, I'm curious, how's that been affected? How do you persevere? And I say that because I'm struggling. Like, I have a job and it makes it really easy for me to default to, I have X, Y, and Z to do today. And after that, I just want to kind of zone out and I can't believe, and I'm really overwhelmed, but there's more to be done.
To be very fair, this is not as creative as these endeavors obviously have been. It still is. I was telling my husband yesterday, I feel like I'm loading up everything I'm going to need in a boat, right, to ride this out. And that the things that need to go on that boat are all the things that are going to sustain us through a season of a lot of uncertainty. So the last, I have one thing that's holding on, but the last thing on my calendar got cleared out yesterday, and that was scheduled for October. So it really is rethinking what's important, what's of value, and how to, not just how to translate it into how to make digital money. Cash App, Dasha KH, but not just how to make digital, how to make digital loot, but really how does using your that language of practice. I had someone in my spirit some years ago that, you know, this is a practice more. It's not performing. It's not just teaching. It's not just writing stuff to write words. Yes, those things happen, but it really is an intentionality in how all those things come together. So then how does this, so what's really important in that practice? And then finding platforms to live that. So it's half making sure that the bill collectors who won't stop calling can get what they need.
Yeah.
And the other part is just figuring out what to put in this boat. So wherever we land on the other end of this, I don't know. Maybe the internet's where I want to live from now on. God, I hope not. But you know, so that's what I've been doing in this season. So putting
and I think too that speaks to and dovetails really nicely with something that Roger said about, you know, if you've got folks in a community with an artistic practice, that already makes that community stronger and safer. So okay.
What about you, Joe?
Well, for me, you know, my gigs got canceled real quick.
Yeah.
And and so yeah, they got canceled. I got really polite emails, but it was like and and I'm also a painter, and so you know, shit shifted quickly. You know, that painting that had to go for 300 went from 300 to 25, like that. And, you know, and the other thing that I started doing, I have journals and journals and journals and journals, and my blog goes back over 12 years. And so I created some e-files that I've been selling. Like I have like a collection of 100 poems and stories. You send me, you know, cash at me $10 and you can have the whole file. And then those sold pretty well. And then I was like, okay, I got to keep going, you know. And then I created like, you know, kind of like some more, like another file of 100 poems and stories, a whole different 100 of like kind of praise poems, and, you know, clean and age appropriate. And and so, I mean, I'm not, you know, out of work as long as I have, you know, stories to sell. But I mean, so I'm okay like right now, but I do have a concern that, you know, what's going to happen if, you know, they don't want another story, or, you know, so you know, I'm on the other end of this whole thing. I kind of want the internet to be where I live for a little while after this is over. I don't want to go back out right now. I do not. That's where I am. And I was like, you know what? And honestly, selling the e-file so quickly, faster than I was able to sell books. You know, people were like, oh, only $10, and I could see it on my, you know, I could see it on my phone, and, you know, and
go ahead. I want to ask this, pointing that right back at you, Katie, because with Jaha and I are speaking of translating the real talk. I mean, if yours isn't real, but the commerce end of living as a creative. But you, and so many of us living as creatives in a cubicle, living as creatives, you know. So how are you feeding that for you?
It's I will say I struggle. I will say that a thing that has been clear to me for years, that I need to be moving in some way, whether it's riding my bike around some lakes or having a dance party in my living room. Actually, this is something that became really clear when we were in school together. And so you, Jaha, might have noticed this as well. When I would cancel everything, all my like yoga classes or going to the gym in favor of finishing my assignments, I wouldn't get assignments done. I had to tend to my body and movement in order for my brain to work. And I find that that's what's happening now as well. If I am on my bike, or if I ordered a jump rope, and then I am able to focus on projects that I had been able to say, that I'd been able to deprioritize and say, as long as I am doing what's on my task list today, I have fulfilled my responsibilities, and being able to treat myself as a responsibility that is worthy of prioritization is something that I just have to hold on to and not let go of
We all needed that. I had someone the other day say, oh my goodness, you know, a 9 to 5 kills your artist's soul. Ugh, we don't want that to be a thing. So thank you for speaking aloud against that. Welcome back, Mr. Roger Bonair-Agard. This technology thing, I don't know. So we've already had a chance to acknowledge the folks who had to scoot along, but I'm really glad that you're able to bring your voice back to us. We're closing out, and the question that Katie posed to everyone was, in this time, you know, how, you know, as a creative, as a creator, and as an artist who does it for a living, all those pieces, how are you making sense of this time? You're muted.
There.
Okay. And then you're gone again. I apologize.
Do we tell him?
You need to. Almost. Just know that we believe in you.
Very
and
hard.
I agree with everything he's saying. Because I know it's the truth.
Can you?
I mean, you're not muted.
Because we don't have you muted. Have you muted yourself, sir? Look what America did. Look what America did.
Right.
He's calling tech support, AKA his partner.
Right.
I hope it's the 6-year-old, though.
Of course it is.
Of course it is. While he's getting it together. And I would also like to give a digital shout out to tech support, AKA my husband, Kima. Thank you.
Hi, Kima. Aw.
Our face.
Hello.
Oh, we can hear you.
I'm going to add him back to screen. Say something great, Roger.
I'm going to try that on my next Zoom meeting. I don't want to be in.
That's right.
I would be making a noise, and my cat on the other side of the door would be like, meow.
Roger, just know that we are sending you all the love, and I agree with Jaha. Whatever you were saying, Roger for president. I mean,
right, for sure, for sure.
That's all we needed. But I want to thank all of you for being a part of this conversation. Those of you who are on screen, and those of you who are listening and watching and commenting online. Y'all onto something. I think this may be a thing, and we're excited to send your poems in. If you have an idea, so it starts this way: what's the first thing that comes to your mind when you think about power? Then find some ideas. What is that about? So if your first idea of power is the power dynamic of a child and a parent, what's the story behind that? And then go find a poem. You can mail that to me at poems@theretreatmke.com. We're going to compile a people's anthology, and we'll talk about that another time later. But just join this conversation. Be thoughtful about power. Be thoughtful about you in the dialogue of power. And also, don't be afraid of poems. Poems get a chance to speak for you, and you always don't know how to put the words together for yourself. Next week, we're going to talk about body. We'll see you right back here at 4:30 Central Standard Time, April Wednesdays. Poemalogues are promoted and supported by the Milwaukee Public Library because I am your Milwaukee Poet Laureate, but this conversation just got global, y'all. Thank you, Roger. And we'll be visited next week from other parts of the nation and right here in Milwaukee. Be amazing because you already are. Thank you.